Rather believe in something than nothing, because otherwise, what is living for?
If you don't stand for something, you will fall for everything.
Welcome, fellow travelers, to the Good Book Club. Today we're doing Exodus number 17.
Number 17, which is divided into 2 parts. Very simple.
2 parts. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Kick off.
Water from the rock, and the Amalekites, spoiler, defeated.
The Hannah what date?
Amalekites.
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 Before we get to the Amalekites, you can actually go to YouTube, which you're watching this on now, and look up the Promised Land pilot episode. It's a mockumentary version of these 2 chapters.
We'll have the link in the description.
Yes, we'll have it there, and they do a mockumentary style of chapters 17 and 18, which we're recording today. And it starts where they complain. They complain this time about...
Complaining about complaining.
They're complaining because they're thirsty. There's no water. And what does God tell Moses to do? How do they get water?
To go to a rock that is very dry, very, very dry.
Yeah,
and then hit it with your staff, or jab it with the staff, and then there will just be randomly water coming out.
And it happened. They were able to drink water from it.
Another miracle just happened right there.
And it's a weird miracle. Imagine God telling you, take a staff, hit a rock in a desert where it's dry, and then...
Isn't it almost
water.
like doing the 10 plagues, except the opposite?
How?
Because it was not a river with water, it was something very dry. That became a water source in that moment.
It's interesting. I haven't thought of that. That's quite cool. And what did they call the place?
They called the place the big sandy desert.
No.
What do they call it?
Massa and Meribah.
Massa, like Massa? Or
No.
Mass, like big?
No, Massah. And Massa.
Okay.
Which means testing.
Okay.
And Meribah, which means quarreling. Or like having conflict.
Oh, okay.
Like you quarrel over something, you argue over something.
Okay.
So you could say, and he called the place testing and quarreling, because the Israelites quarreled, and because they tested law, saying, is he among us or not?
Wow. They were testing God, but God was testing them.
Was he testing them?
If you think about, God was... They were, how long were they on the desert?
40 years.
40 years, and it was a trial test, or...
Well, he wanted them to trust him, and when they didn't have stuff, they doubted in him. Isn't that what we do sometimes?
Yeah,
we
sure.
don't have something, so then we doubt God's witness.
Doubt God, and isn't that also God putting us through a test of seeing if we stick to our faith, or like we're just gonna like give in and just like flip to the other side? Like spoilers with the golden calf.
Right, chapter 32. It makes me think of Daniel and his 3 friends. They said, even if God doesn't save us, we will still believe in him. And they were thrown into a fiery furnace. They did survive, but they said, even if the Lord doesn't save us, we still believe in him.
Right. Rather believe in something than nothing, because otherwise, what is living for?
If you don't stand for something, you will fall for everything.
That's very well said.
Thank you. I heard it somewhere. I don't know who said it originally. But that makes me think, do we just believe in God when we get stuff, or do we believe in him regardless?
That's a good question. That's a very, very good question, because do we believe when some people only believe when they get stuff, and then it's asking for miracles basically the whole time.
And Jesus actually, there was a time where they kept on asking him for miracles, and he said only an adulterous and disobedient generation asks for a sign, and the sign I will give is the sign of Jonah, which is talking about his death and resurrection. But if you keep on living on miracles, that's not really a relationship.
It's living miracle, but miracle is tangible stuff, if you think about it.
Because miracles are great. I'm not dismissing it. It is great when the Lord heals someone and so on. But if you just live from miracle to miracle, and that's only what you want from God, then it's not really a relationship. It's like me constantly doing great things for you, doing you huge favors. But
just
that's
taking that
that's
for
the only
granted.
thing you want from me.
Mm,
You
yeah.
don't ever want to just sit and talk,
Yes.
or go on a walk, or go climb a mountain, or
Mm.
do anything.
Yes, like taking for granted.
That's what I think they were also doing by testing him. They didn't desire that relationship, which connects well to chapter 19 and 20.
Don't we always do? Aren't we also like culprits to that sometimes?
What do you mean?
Asking God for signs and then like once in a while, I don't know. To me, like sometimes I ask like I want a definite answer on this. So it doesn't even need to be a miracle, but it's like asking for a sign. Like, is it a yes or a no? Because I'm really confused.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this, so please make it very clear. Is it a yes or no?
That's a good thing to ask. And then the Lord will answer you. And then sometimes we say, okay, but if you're sure, give me another sign. And that's what Gideon did. He took a fleece and said, if this fleece is dry but the ground is wet, I will know it's from you. Didn't happen. It's like, okay, but now make the fleece wet and the ground dry. And this guy's just taking his time. And God just said, you're going to fight and defeat the Midianites. And then eventually he got to it.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was just the interesting question that I had. Do you believe in God if he provides or not?
Wow. I would say I do.
Okay. That's good. Because
do you?
I would hope so. Because sometimes you can really doubt if things don't happen, but you often forget what God has done already for you.
And what keeps me saying is to just remind myself of his sense of humor. Because his sense of humor is always like really on the brink of where you just want to like not snap, but it's like
It's like the joke where a day, no, not a joke, it's actually so in the Bible, a day for the Lord is like 1,000 years. 1,000 years is like a day. So when God says it will happen soon, it could be 1,000 years. Like, for example, when he said in Revelation, I'm coming soon, that's 2,000 years ago. For him, it was like, oh, it's like 2 days.
Yeah.
So if he says it's happening soon, that could mean it's happening in 1,000 years. Like, before Jesus was born and everyone is asking when is the Messiah coming, it's like it will happen soon. They waited 1,000 years for him. It's like a day.
Unexpectedly.
It's like a day.
Like psych, it's today.
Actually, the first coming, there were a lot of hints of what will take place before he arrives. The second one will be unexpected, like a thief in the night.
Yeah. John chapter what? 16.
16. I think he talks about it there, but also in the other Gospels he talks about like a thief in the night when you least expect it. And the other part of Exodus 17 is where God told Moses to take his staff, stand on a high hill, and he had to keep it upright. But
freedom!
As long as they had it in the air, they were winning against the Amalekites, which Joshua fought against. But if he got tired, what happened then? Started losing. So Hur and Aaron, his brother, they held him from either side to keep his hands up, and they gave him a stone to sit on. So eventually he was sitting, holding it up, and their arms were holding it with him, and then they were winning. So it was a staff and a banner that they had to look at, and that encouraged them.
Did you know none of them were engineers?
Why?
Engineers who have taken sticks and just tied it to his arms to stay up.
That's actually quite clever. Yeah, they didn't think of that. But what this makes me think of is a story that happens in Acts. Remember Stephen?
Stephen who?
The first martyr.
Ah.
He was the first one to be killed for believing in God. In Jesus.
Yeah. Okay.
So while they were stoning him, he said, don't hold this against them. But what he saw was Jesus standing on the right side of the Father, and it was like a banner for him. And that's the Lord standing and saying, you will have victory. And this links to me with that story of here. The banner was the staff in hand. Whenever it was lifted high, they were winning. And for Stephen, he saw Jesus in heaven standing. So it was from a high place, and that was his banner. That kept him in, I'm going to win, even though I'm being stoned to death.
That's interesting.
So that was a cool connection for me. And another interesting thing in verse 14, it says that God will completely blot out the name of Amalek from under heaven.
What's Amalek?
Amalek is the people group that they were fighting against.
Oh.
And he will completely blot out their name. That's as if you take Tipex and then take out the ink as if it was never written. And I was always curious, if God says about a people group that he wants to blot out their name, then that's really bad.
Is it like making them go extinct or what?
Yes, like as if they never existed. And it says that because hands were lifted up against the throne of the Lord will be at war against the Amalekites from generation to generation. And I don't remember where, but I think in Joshua's book, they did eventually wipe them out completely, if I have it correctly.
That is like...
And it's actually quite cool because already in chapter 17, Joshua gets a bit of a spotlight because he goes and fights the war. And then a few books later in Joshua, that's basically his book, is go and have one war after the other. But first there's like a detailed report of what happens in those years before Joshua reigns. I think this is like 40 years, really well documented. Just a bunch of laws, 613. And then they go and have war. And that's chapter 17.